The final portion we're going to look at this week from chapter 5 is the idea of a sentinel. Now, a sentinel is a special value, and it's a special value that you use to mark the end of a set of data to entry. So what we're saying is that you have a value that you are going to communicate to your end user, and that user is going to know that, look, if I am inside of a while loop, so remember that while loop is going to continue until we have a false for whatever that check in our statement is. So whatever the evaluation is going to be, we want it to turn false. So what we're saying with a sentinel is we can say do whatever it is that we're going to do while something is not true. So if you are going to, let's just set up here a data entry example. So we have a tremendous need for a tremendous amount of data to be entered. Some of this data, just let's take a step back from the Sentinel here for just a moment and just think about data in general. One of, and I've said this before, and as a matter of fact, I'll say it again here in 276, and for those of you who continue on to advanced C++, I'll actually say it there too, is that Excel is one of the most important business tools that we have, and that's because it allows us to enter data. Now, getting information out of that data, that comes later. As a matter of fact, that's going to be part of what your jobs are as developers, is to find a way with regular expressions to be able to get your data to produce for you information. Data doesn't mean anything. Information is what we can do with patterns in that data to make better decisions. So if I have data entry personnel just doing data entry, now I actually argue this is not a job that I could do. I am in no way, shape, or form careful enough. I'm not a good typer. It really, I'm not fastidious when it comes to data entry. I'm really bad at it. Dyslexia kind of doesn't help. So not me. That is not for me. And it is a vitally important job for people to do. Now, just consider what it's like for the data entry personnel to be entering data. So very, very hopefully they have a 10 key keyboard. So just for frame here, the 10 key on the keyboard. So please do take a note here. 1 through 3, 4 through 7, 8, or 4 through 6 rather, 7, 8, 9 on the top row. That's going to be important when we are selecting what we're going to do for a sentinel. And again, a sentinel is just a special value to mark the end of a set of data. Now, when your data entry personnel is doing data entry, they are not looking down here at the keyboard like many of us would be doing when we are entering data. Data entry personnel are looking off over here at one screen, off over here at something else, and they are very, very adept at not making mistakes when they are plugging things away on the keyboard. So what we want to do when we are selecting our Sentinel, that special value that marks the end of a data collection so that we can move on with the rest of our program, we want to make sure that it's something that is outside of what the data entry personnel is likely to type. So here we will see, and this is on page 264, if I haven't mentioned that already, we will see what the Sentinel does for us inside of, in this case, it's a while loop. We will see what it does in just a moment. But what I do want to mention is a Sentinel should be 3 things. It should be unmistakable to type. It should, so you can't make an accident is what I'm saying. It should be outside of the realm of probable data entry, and it should be outside of the realm of possible data entry. So in this example, what we are doing is we are getting points to determine things for like a GPA, let's say, for example. Not the example you see behind me here, just the verbal example we're talking about here. So if I'm going to create a program that goes from desk to desk to desk to desk in a classroom, and it gets the score for a test so that I can get the average for that. So let's think about what is the realm of possible values for scoring on a test. Now, is 0 a possible value for a score on a test? Yes. 0 does not make a good Sentinel because it is inside of the realm of possible values. Now, I know each and every single one of you watching this right now is saying, I've never seen anybody get a 0 on a test, let alone certainly not me. I can assure you it does happen. 100. 100 is not a good Sentinel for a test because it's entirely within the range of possible values that people can score on a test. So 100 isn't good. 0 isn't good. Those are possible. Now we're going to start to stretch the boundaries of possible a little bit more. Is it possible to get 101? Yeah, there could be extra credit. Is it possible to get 102? Yeah, there could be extra credit. So those don't make good possible data entries. What about 999? Is it possible to get a 999 on your on a test? No, probably not, right? Unless your obnoxiously large check cleared and your bribe was successful. A 999 is not a possible score for a test. But it doesn't make a good Sentinel because it's entirely possible when somebody is doing the data entry, instead of a score of 99, they accidentally hit the 9 one too many times and we get 999. So I would suggest that 999 is not a good Sentinel value because even though it's not probable, it's possible to hit that combination of keys. Now, -1 is a much better Sentinel for that. If you look at your keyboard, even if you just have, one without the 10 key, you'll notice that the negative, the minus sign, and the 1 are on opposite ends of your number row in your keyboard. If I look down here at my keyboard a second time, the minus is in the upper right-hand corner, the 1 is in the lower left. -1 is outside of the range of possible values. You can't get a -1. That's like, I would call that asshole tax. You have done something so egregious, I'm taking points away from you. Really, it doesn't happen in test scores, right? So it is outside of the range of possible values. It is outside of the range of probable values, ones that don't happen often but can happen. -1 is not a good entry for a test. And it's also outside of the possible data entry accidents. So like 999 was, that's entirely possible. But for -1, you have to go from one side of your keyboard to the other. You have to go on your 10 key from one corner upper right and go all the way down to lower left. So -1 as a Sentinel here makes a really good value to be able to enter that tells our while loop. Once you see -1 as the entry, stop looping through this statement. So we're going to look here just really quickly. This is program 5-13, and you can see that our Sentinel on line number 18, while points does not equal -1. So what we're saying is we're starting off by giving points no value, right? So we are not initializing points, and we don't have to initialize points because on line number 16, we're actually getting an entry for points from the user. So the user on line number 16 during runtime enters in a value, and we'll just go through what could possibly happen here with our while loop. So the first example, a user enters -1. So a user enters -1 on line number 16, and then on line number 18, when that while loop is evaluated, and it is points does not equal to -1. That's false, right? Because points does equal -1. So we actually do not go inside of that while loop. That Sentinel, which was entered on purpose with great care by your user, means that we're not looking to do this particular piece of code right now. So that is one scenario. So let's go scenario number 2. We only want to enter in one piece of data here. So the very first time around on line number 16, there is uninitialized for our int for points because we are getting that value from the user. So on line number 16, your user enters that value for points. Let's say it's 10 this time. So then we go inside of our while loop because points does not equal -1. So that's still a true statement. We can go inside of our while loop. So what we're doing is we're getting an accumulator here. So total is going to get the total number of points and add that back to total. So total plus equals points. That's our combined assignment for that. We are going to increment game. So game plus plus, that's going to increment that counter for us so that later on we can output that value. And next, you've noticed here, we're going to enter the points for our next game. Now, if I enter a -1 here, look what happens. We go back up to the top of that while statement because we're in a loop. So we are stuck inside of that program block, in that statement block, the opening and closing curly braces. And now we have to evaluate that statement a second time. So I entered -1. So this time, points does equal -1. This statement evaluates as false, and I'm booted outside of that statement. So here on line number 23, then, the total points are, we're going to see the total, and we should, I would argue here, because you've got a counter, why have the counter if you're not going to show it? So game plus plus, you could also tell the user how many games were entered. I think that that's good and in addition here, but why not? So here's scenario number 3, that we do want to enter multiple values. So let's say this time I come through, run the program on line number 16, a user enters a value, 10. So we go inside of our while loop because 10 does not equal -1. So then we add to our accumulator. So total is our accumulator. We add points. We increment our game counter. We ask for more points. This time I put in 9. So then we go back to the top of our loop. 9 does not equal -1. So we continue on through our loop. We add the points to our accumulator total. We increment our counter game, and we keep going. So let's keep going. We're going to enter 8. Keep going through. We're going to enter 7, keep going through. 6, keep going through. 2, keep going through. 1, keep going through. The very last time we're going to enter -1. So the Sentinel with the at the bottom of our while loop getting a new value that we're entering here also assures that when that while loop is evaluated, that I'm not adding -1 to my accumulator, to my total. I'm also not going through and adding an off by 1 extra increment for game, my counter here. So this way, when in normal flow, top to bottom, left to right, in that order exclusively, we get to line number 25 and we see out our total points are, that number is going to be correct. And it's going to be 10 plus 9 plus 8 plus 7 ... plus 2 plus 1. So that turns out to work really well. So remember, with a Sentinel, it should be a value that is outside of the realm of possible answers, outside of the realm of probable answers, and outside of the realm of answers that are easily to mistakenly enter. So like a -1 is great for a test because you're not getting a -1. A Q is good, for 1, 2, 3, 4 Q, because if I'm going through a menu, I have to go on my number row or here by my 10 key, 1 for entry, 2 for deletion, 3 for, printing, Q to quit. Q is a fantastic character to enter for that because it is outside of your number row, so it's harder to mistakenly enter that. So we will use Sentinels. Please also remember that there at the back end of our Eagle module here, we do have the code samples. There is a code sample that uses the Sentinel there. So go take a look and watch it in action. These really will help you manage your looping mechanisms a lot more easily than if we didn't have Sentinels to do it with.